What's going on, everybody? It's your boy BJ, the DJ. You are now tuned into the B side. That's right. This is the B side. This is the first release of the B side. This is something that I had wanted to implement into the podcast early on, but just trying to figure things out, trying to get things done the right way, just hasn't been possible. So, we just finished up with episode 7 talking about producers. And what I want to do for the B side of this episode is I want to go into my honorable mention category. I had mentioned in episode 7 that there were way too many producers to break things down into like a top 10 category. So I have about four, I think I have about four honorable mentions that could have easily fallen in the top 10 category, but it's very difficult to leave the ones out that I had in there, in my opinion. Like I said, this is all based on my opinion. So, these individuals deserve acknowledgement in their own right. They're responsible for creating something like truly, genuinely special, each of them. So, I won't waste any time. The B side will also be a shorter segment than what the actual podcast episode is, but not quite as short. So, let's get to it. First up, I had Beats by the Pound, also known as the Medicine Men. Now, they were the in-house team for No Limit during their iconic run. Um, the amount of music put out by this team in the mid to late 90s is absolutely unbelievable. Their biggest year came in 98. They released 23 albums. Take that in perspective that most people release one album that may be lucky to sell a million. They had 23 albums that sold 15 million copies, which means the majority of those albums either went gold or platinum. So let's talk about that year, 1998, which was No Limit's best year. And let's just talk about some of the albums that came out that year. We got Young Bleed, My Balls and My Word, which is a fantastic album. Really didn't fit the mold for No Limit, but the production style, I think Odell handled most of the production on there, but the whole Beats by the Pound crew was on hand for that particular release. Next up, you had Silk the Shocker, Charge It to the Game. This was Silk's coming of age album. Like, the Shocker was great, but this was the one that really put him on the map. And, say what you want about Silk as a lyricist, he sold records for No Limit, right? Next up, you had See Murder, Life or Death. Iconic album for No Limit. Great debut album for C Murder. Really brought him to the world. Then you had the I Got the Hookup soundtrack. This was one of the first times I saw No Limit really reaching out. I know they'd done some compilations in the past, but they still stuck to like a regional base, like with your Down South Hustlers, West Coast Bad Boys. With I Got the Hookup, they had some really A-list rappers on there. A-Ball, MJG, Bone Thugs and Harmony, Jay-Z, Sauce Money had a song on the I Got the Hookup soundtrack. So they really went well beyond their region of New Orleans or even the West Coast. They really spread that one out. So, and I think I Got the Hookup went platinum as well. Then you got one of my favorite No Limit releases, Fiend. There's one in every family. You also get another one, Soldier Slim, Give It to Him Raw, another great No Limit release. Master P's double album, The Last Don, would come out also that same year. Cain and Abel's very slept on release, Am I My Brother's Keeper? You had Mac, Shell Shocked, one of the greatest No Limit releases of all time. Snoop Dogg's The Game Is to Be Sold, Not to Be Told. This was Snoop's very first release for No Limit. And this was the cool thing about this release was you saw a different side of Snoop rapping on Southern style type beats. But I really feel like they did a great job bringing Snoop's No Limit release to the West Coast, like really changing their sound to fit Snoop's style. So it was a really great release for those two, Snoop and Beats by the Pound. Then you got Big Ed the Assassin. I don't know what took so long for this album to come out. It's great. It's iconic. It's one of the best No Limit releases ever, but it's his only release on No Limit. I mean, he would be featured on other albums, but this was Big Ed's only release on No Limit. Skullduggery, these Wicked Streets, very underappreciated No Limit release as well. Skullduggery is one of those guys who was on the tank for many years before they even blew up, and I think after this release he would leave No Limit, but he was very slept on, I guess you would say. Just kind of blended in with the crew. But definitely this was a great release. These Wicked Streets was probably, I think this one was better than Hoodlum for Life, in my opinion. But this was the year that everybody's releases were winning. Everybody's release on No Limit hit this year. You had Magic's Sky's the Limit, which was his debut album with No Limit. You had Prime Suspects, Guilty Till Proven Innocent. The iconic song on there was My Old Lady. Great song, had Snoop on the hook, had Fiend on the hook with Snoop on the verse. Dope song on that one. I don't think that one sold what they expected, but I think it still did pretty good numbers considering. Gambino Family Ghetto Organized was also a pretty decent underappreciated release. Mia X Mama Drama went gold, and then you get the great debut by Mystical Ghetto Fabulous that went on to sell multi platinum. I think so. As far as Beats by the Pound and the Medicine Men go, we could talk about those iconic No Limit releases, but some of the biggest ones, I'm About It. You got the Ice Cream Man, the I Got the Hookup soundtrack, Make 'em Say, probably the biggest single ever produced from No Limit. KLC would also find success after No Limit producing Move Bitch for Ludacris. So definitely want to put Beats by the Pound on there. Again, like I said, they could easily have fit in the top 10, but just couldn't find a way to squeeze them in and move somebody out, right? Next up, I'm going to talk about a group called the Trackmasters, also known as Poke and Tone. So in 1995, LL Cool J would release his Mr. Smith album. They would have a couple of the most iconic singles off of that. Hey Lover would reach number 3 on the Billboard charts and also be certified platinum that year. Also, the often overlooked lounging single, and we cannot forget the I Shot You remix. That is probably one of the most iconic remixes ever produced, but that instrumental in itself is dangerous. Every rapper who has ever freestyled at any given time has freestyled on that I Shot You beat. One of the most iconic freestyles I remember hearing was the Beanie Siegel Freeway. I think it was Hot 97 where they took over. Rockefeller showed up and Beanie and Mac did their thing on that instrumental. So one of my favorite instrumentals is that I Shot You. They would also not be pigeonholed into a box. They would also get grimy on Nas's It Was Written album in 1996. They produced Street Dreams and If I Ruled the World. The mid 90s, they were the go-to. If you wanted a hit single, Trackmasters were the go-to, right? Their catalog would also include Big Willie Style by Will Smith. That did stupid numbers, even for that day and age. And Will Smith was one of those. They often laughed at him and said he was a corny rapper, but I mean, Will Smith sold records, man. He was unbelievable. Trackmasters would also be the first to sign 50 Cent. The Power of a Dollar album was supposed to come out and they shelved it. But yeah, they were responsible for signing 50 Cent and bringing him to the forefront I think that was the mid 90s, right? Definitely innovators in the early 90s in the hip hop movement. So can't forget Trackmasters. Often, like I said, very underappreciated, often overlooked producer team, Poke and Tone. So next up, let's show the West Coast some love. I did some research on this particular producer and did not realize his catalog was extensive as it was. Let's talk about DJ Pooh. Now, I mean, he is. You talk about a sleeper as a producer, right? Most people know him from the Friday movie, but I mean, his history and his relationship with music, especially on the West Coast, is cannot go overlooked anymore, right? DJ Pooh is also responsible for bringing us "I Need Love" by LL Cool J. I didn't know that. I just found that out. He also produced the greatest diss record of all time with No Vaseline for Ice Cube. And he also produced It Was a Good Day. So, 3 iconic songs in the history of hip hop were produced by DJ Pooh. Like I said, often overlooked, underappreciated producer, very innovative in helping create that iconic West Coast sound in the late 80s, early 90s. He worked with everybody from Ice Cube to Snoop to Pac, right? So definitely can't overlook DJ Pooh. So I wanted to make sure I gave him his flowers and also included him on this list. I wouldn't have necessarily put him in my top 10, but I didn't have a lot of representation for the West Coast. And there's other producers from the West Coast like Ant Banks that don't get the respect they deserve either. Warren G, for instance, also, the production that he does, Daz Dillinger, several that are often overlooked. But after looking at DJ Pooh's production discography, I just felt like he had to be included in some way. And last on my honorable mention list, I have to mention Swiss Beats. Now, Swiss Beats could actually have made his way into the top 10, and there was probably room for him. I just couldn't figure out a way to make it work to where I pull somebody off and put somebody on for Swiss. Now, Swiss Beats is known for creating that Rough Rider sound. He was able to bring commercial success to one of the most gangster, grimiest labels in all of New York, right? He is responsible for some really, really big records. Rough Rider Anthem for instance, put DMX on the map, right? Went double platinum. Money Cash Hoes for Jay-Z off Volume 2. You got Party Up, also by DMX, which is probably DMX's biggest commercial success as a single. Bring Them Out by T.I. The cool thing about that single particularly is that was the first time a Jay-Z sample had been cleared after he retired. Swiss was able to make that happen for T.I. He did Check on It by Beyonce and Slim Thug. Banned from TV for Nori. Let's not forget Spit Your Game, featuring Big, Twista, and Crazy Bone. The remix would also feature A-Ball and MJG off the Biggie Duets album. He would also produce Roman's Revenge for Nicki Minaj that featured Eminem. Didn't know that actually until I started looking at his production credentials. So another sleeper pick here recently that he did was a song called Science Class by Westside Gunn. I'm a huge Westside Gunn fan. I was glad to see them two be able to link up for something. So yeah, definitely Swiss could have easily have been included in that top 10 list. I just couldn't find a way to fit him on and pull somebody off, right? But he definitely deserves his flowers, deserves recognition. He's one of the greatest hip hop producers of all time. So that's my list, my honorable mentions. This is related to episode 7, where we talked about producers. This has been the B-side. I'm BJ the DJ. Make sure you rewind. I'm out.